We are already acquainted with the ancient descriptions of the Kemites by various peoples around them. Many of them described the Kemites as dark-skinned Africans or simply black. And these descriptions come from credible sources too, yet you would often hear from modern Western scholars that we are misquoting them or misinterpreting what the ancients said, even though they don't show how we are misquoting or misinterpreting these descriptions. Often you would hear them attack the quote of Herodotus on the Colchians in his book The Histories section 2:104. But we know very well that that quote is not the only one calling the Kemites black. There are two other sections that called the Kemites black in that very same book, and many other instances where various other authors from ancient Greece and Rome called the Kemites black, yet you would never hear it mentioned in these debunking studies. The scholars simply ignore those two and the other multitude of ancient descriptions calling the Kemites black or very dark complexioned. Even during the 1974 Cairo Symposium, organized by UNESCO, Western and Arab scholars simply kept quiet when asked about the reason why those descriptions existed. They failed at the time to come up with a sound answer to that question, and to this day, they still can't justify them. Why is that, you may ask? Well, that's because they can't justify them without sounding irrational. So for all these years, they have just given it the silent treatment. Now it's not like no one has tried to debunk those statements. You still have many in my comment section who try to do so, yet unsuccessfully. Here is how they do it. They comment claim that those words are misinterpreted and that the ancient Greeks called black people Aethiops, and that they never used the terms used in the original texts of those descriptions to refer to black Africans. Well, is that so? Did the ancients never use terms such as melanes or melancroes in order to describe other Africans further south? Did they always use the term Aethiops to refer to other Africans further south, as many claim in my comment section? This is what we are going to see in this video, by doing a careful study on the words used in the original ancient texts. Let's see if they are right to speak of misinterpretation or mistranslations. In this video, we are also going to witness a certain lack of integrity of certain modern translations and expose the bias against black people in this field. Alright, that was quite the long intro, so let's get right into the video. So, in order to find out whether the interpretations of the translated text were sound, we have to look at the terms used in the original texts. This is something I had done before when I made my video on the ancient descriptions, a video that you can go check out on my channel or up here. I did this check of the original texts in order to make sure that I did not spread misinterpretations or outright misinformation. This is something I encourage everyone to do. Always fact check your sources. So in doing that research, I have managed to identify 6 terms in ancient Greek plus 1 in Latin that were used in the original texts to describe the ancient Egyptians. These words are, excuse my pronunciation here, I'm not sure that this is the way you pronounce these words. Maybe modern Greeks can help me here. So let's go. These words are melanes, melanas, melancroes, melainan, melain, Meleicsimos, plus 1 Latin word atrati. There is an extra word called Aethiops that is claimed by certain dishonest people to be the sole descriptor in ancient Greek for black people. I am saying this because I have checked the original text already, and it is not the sole term, as you will see further in this video. By the end of this video, you will see that the term Aethiops being used as the sole term for black people will prove to be utterly false, flawed, and disingenuous. Therefore, in this video, we are going to see what these words mean, where they were used, and whom they used them on, and in what context. We're also going to show the original texts with highlights on the corresponding words that concern us, in order for you to know that I am not misleading you. You don't need to be an ancient Greek expert in order for you to notice these words. After watching this, you will be able to debunk people who say that these are misinterpretations of the original meaning. Also, all the original text will be linked in the description below. These sources are all free since they are ancient texts, so feel free to go check them. After watching this, you will see that the ancient Greeks and Romans viewed the ancient Egyptians as black people, undeniably black Africans. So let's get right into it. We start with the word melanes. 1. Melanes. This word was used in several instances to describe both the ancient Egyptians and the Nubians and other Africans further south, whom they called Ethiopians at the time. So here, be careful. Ethiopian is not the modern term Ethiopian. It's not the modern day people of Ethiopia, but the ancient African people further south, including the Nubians. So, the term melanes was used by 4 different authors when describing the Egyptians and the Ethiopians. For instance, Herodotus says in the Histories, Book 2, Section 22, I quote, "The people dwelling there, the Egyptians, are black because of the heat." In the original Greek text, the author used the term melanes in order to describe the skin of the Kemites, which led serious scholars to translate it as black, since the term melanes means black. The unserious scholars would have people who have not seen the original texts believe that they said melanchrous in all instances, which to them doesn't mean black but dark skin. But here, Herodotus did not use melanchrous, he used the term melanes. And would you know what Google Translate gave me when I typed in the word melanes? See for yourselves. Black people. Straight up, black people. Oh my god, it's raining again. Anyway, some might say that this is not the most reliable translator out there. So, I have done the work for you. I went to check these words in lexicons. According to these 2 lexicons, oh my god. Sorry, bro. According to 2 different lexicons, the term melanes means black. Also, if the term melanes does not mean black, one has to explain why Diodorus Siculis in the libraries also used the term melanes to describe the Ethiopians that lived along the banks of the Nile. Here is the quote. But there are also a great many other tribes of the Ethiopians, some of them dwelling in the land lying on both banks of the Nile and on the islands in the river, others inhabiting the neighboring country of Arabia, and still others residing in the interior of Libya. The majority of them, and especially those who dwell along the river, are black in color and have flat noses and woolly hair. Here is the Greek translation again. Ethiopian, Arabia, and melanes were used, so you can use these terms as reference. We clearly see here that melanes is also used to refer to the complexion of undeniably black people. They are described as having flat noses, woolly hair, and black skin, and they are Ethiopians. So we know that he is talking about black Africans here. So why would Herodotus use a term that meant black to describe the Kemites if, as modern scholars claim, the Kemites were not black? No answer. The term melanes means black. The author is therefore speaking of the same black skin we see in Africans all over the continent. That's why serious scholars again translated this term as black. And let us not forget that the term melanes contains the root melan or melas, which means black or very dark hue, which still amounts to being black. This is where they even derived the word melanin, which is what makes the skin of some humans so dark in hue, like us Africans. The same term melanes was also used by Achilles Tatius, who in his book Clitophon and Leucippe writes this. They, the Egyptian brigands, were all tall and stout. Their complexion was black, not the jet black of the Indians, but that of a mongrel Ethiopian. Again, you get the original Greek text. Melanes was used, Indian, Aethiope. Okay. Their complexion was black like that of a mongrel Ethiopian. we can see that melanes was used for both the Black Indian Dravidians, Kemites, and the Cushites. Now, the author is careful to remind us that the Kemites they are describing are not like the Black Dravidians of India, but they are more like Ethiopians or other Africans. What gave that away? Most likely the hair texture of the Egyptians. The Dravidians, though they have black skin, do not have woolly hair, but the Kemites, Cushites, and other Africans further south do. One can see this in the crowns of Kemites, for example. They resemble African hairstyles. The brilliant video by the YouTube channel Mr.Imhotep just did a video on this very topic. The Kemites' crowns resemble African hairstyles. Link in the description to the video and to the channel of Mr.Imhotep. Go over there and be utterly convinced of what I have just stated here about the ancient Egyptians' hair texture. They had woolly hair. It's definitely true. We continue. The last place I know of where the word melanes was used is in the Physiognomics by Pseudo-Aristotle, which reads, "Those who are too swarthy are cowardly." This applies to the Egyptians and Ethiopians. Original Greek text, Agan melanes is too swarthy, Aegyptians and Aethiopians. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing correctly these words, but if you have a smidgen of Greek in your head, you can see that these are the corresponding words. Here we see the first attempt by modern scholars to drown the fish by translating the word melanes by swarthy. We already saw on 3 instances that the word melanes simply means black. How do I know this is an attempt to cover up the truth? Well, because this translation is from the early 1900s, the era when Egyptology and European scholars were working hard to remove Kemites from Africa, but it didn't work because they taught ancient Greek in African schools. So it just so happened that a certain young man named Teofilo Benga was especially good in ancient Greek, to the point where his teacher was like, "Yo, you're better than my white students on this. Please come to France with me. I want my people to give you a scholarship to study Greek." So he did. Dr. Teofilo Benga was so good at the ancient Greek language that he became an expert in it when he later became a linguist. So thanks to Dr. Teofilo Benga and other ancient Greek language experts, we know that Agan melanes here should be translated as excessively black, not too swarthy. Though swarthy still means very dark, but it's a vague term. It can mean other things too. To prove to you that even the scholars translating this knew that Agan melanes should be translated as excessively black, I will use the same book in order to prove that they knew this, because in it they translated the same terms as excessively black. Here is the evidence, Your Honor. "Those whose eyes are excessively black are cowardly, for it was shown above that an excessively black color signifies cowardice." Original Greek, Agan melanes was used, and then Agan melain. Alright. Got you, modern scholars. So already the conspiracy is caught in an attempt to manipulate. How can you translate in many other places, in the same book by the way, the term melanes as black, and only when the Egyptians are mentioned, you choose to translate it with the word swarthy? Aha! In light of this evidence, we can only conclude that the term melanes means black, and this term was applied to describe the skin complexion of the Cushites, the Kemites, and other Africans further south, known as the Ethiopians by the ancient Greeks. Next term, 2. Melanas. This term is a bit similar to the first one. This one also most definitely means black, since it was used on 2 instances to describe the complexion of the Twa people, aka the Pygmies, and the complexion of the Nubians, also known as the Ethiopians. But we also find it being used to describe the Egyptians. In the Histories Book 2, Section 32, Herodotus mentioned that he was told by the Libyans that there were a people who dwelled in the interior of the African continent across the desert. And he was also told by the Libyans that these men were shorter than most men and had black skin. Here is the quote. As they began to pluck it, there came upon them small men of less stature than men of common size, and these seized them and carried them away. After passing through these, they came to a city in which all the men were in size like those who carried them off, and in color of skin black. The original Greek text is below, and the term melanas was used. We can tell that he is clearly speaking of the Twa people here. Men of smaller stature than most men, with black skin, and they lived in the dense forests across the desert, that is the Sahara Desert, therefore in West Africa, definitely the Twa people. So to describe their complexion, he uses the term melanas, just like Lucian of Samosata in The Ship or the Wishes did. Here is the quote. Suppose Leucippe, that an Ethiopian who had never been abroad in his life, nor seen other men like us, were to state categorically in an Ethiopian assembly that there did not exist on earth any white or yellow men, nothing but blacks, would his statement be accepted? And then we have the original Greek text, melanas was used. Nor seen other men like us. Then they will come and tell us that the ancient people did not see race. Clearly they did, because race is a visual concept. We see that the term melanas is again used to describe the complexion of the Ethiopians. Now see this quote from Heliodorus' Aethiopica. But she, not in the least terrified of the Egyptian pirates' unusual complexion and piratical appearance, she raised herself again, and seeing their dark complexion and rugged looks, and in the original texts, they used melanas again. We see here again another attempt to drown the fish and mistranslate what the original said. They used the term melanas, which means black, as we already saw in other translations. But the scholars like to play mind games with people. When the Greeks are speaking of the Cushites or other Africans further south, the term melanas is eagerly translated as black. But when the Greeks use the same term, melanas, to speak of the skin of the Kemites, they fail to translate it as black. They instead write dark complexion, which is a less precise term. They are afraid that their students of ancient writings will see all these translations of ancient Greek scholars describing the ancient Egyptians as black. Caught red-handed again. Next term. 3. Melan cross. The only term that modern scholarship dared to attack. But somehow they failed to address the previous terms I have just mentioned. Why? Anyhow, this shows that they have no sound arguments against them. The word melancros was used by Herodotus in the Histories, Book 2, Section 104, when he was speaking of the complexion of the Colchians. I quote, "The people of Colchis are evidently Egyptian. That this was so I conjectured myself, not only because they are dark-skinned and have curly hair. This of itself amounts to nothing, for there are other races which are so, but also still more because the Colchians, the Egyptians, and the Ethiopians, alone of all the races of men, have practiced circumcision from the first." Original Greek text, melancros was used, Colchi and Aegypte, and Ethiopian. Now, here they translated melancros as dark skin, though we already saw that the root melan means black, the word melanin being derived from this root melan. This is why other serious scholars and more honest scholars translated this as black-skinned instead of dark-skinned. Confer these two other translations. One is a translation by Andrea L. Purvis, which states, "The Egyptians stated that they believed the Colchians were from the army of Sesostris. I myself had also guessed that, first because they are black-skinned and woolly-haired." Another translation is that of the scholar George Rawlinson. Still, the Egyptians said that they believed the Colchians to be descended from the army of Sesostris. My own conjectures were founded, first on the fact that they are black-skinned and have woolly hair. Now, both these translations used the term black-skinned and woolly hair instead of curly hair, another attempt to drown the fish. You say curly hair, people think, oh,
well, must be Near Easterners.
But woolly hair is really African hair texture, but a better term for it, as I heard one scholar state, should be crinkly, the texture we see in Africans further south, all over Africa.
Herodotus describes a group of people called the Colchians as being black. And I would push, he doesn't say that they have dark skin and woolly hair. They say have black skin and kinky hair. Using woolly hair actually pretends that the word that he's using is the same word that's used for sheep, and it's not. Sheep's hair is not the word they use to describe people's hair. So we want to be careful. It's like tightly twisted, right? Or kinky hair, not woolly hair. And it's not dark skin, it's black. And this is a word that is used of Ethiopians, of Egyptians, of Odysseus, and others, right? But it codes differently in different contexts. So the question is, are they of Egyptian stock? It is very likely that there was Egyptians who, for whatever reason, settled in the Black Sea. The Black Sea has hundreds of colonies that settled all along it. The city of Miletus itself settled something like 90 colonies and trade outposts on the Black Sea.
So we got two translations against one that used the term black-skinned instead of dark-skinned. One is that of Andrea Purvis, who was a PhD in classics. I said was because she passed away in the year 2018. George Rawlinson was a British scholar who lived in the days of Champollion the Young. He translated his work in the years 1800s. So in light of this, we can safely say that Melancroes also means black skin. And again, remember, Melancroes has the root melan, which means black. Remember, melanin. But Herodotus goes even further to link the Colchians to the other Africans not only through skin color and hair texture, but also through cultural practices. They both practiced circumcision, a cultural link. In this quote, we can also observe that Herodotus indirectly uses the term Melancroes on the Ethiopians by lumping them with the Kemites and the Colchians. Since he says that other people also have black skin and woolly hair, we can safely assume that he was also speaking of the Ethiopians. From this, we can get that there were black-skinned people with woolly hair in other places than Africa. A topic for another video. Next term. 4. Melainan and Melain. Melainan and Melain both certainly mean black. The term Melainan was translated as black by scholars in all the translated versions of Herodotus' Histories, Book 2, Section 57. I quote, "And in saying that the dove was black, they, the Dodonians, indicated that the woman was Egyptian." Original Greek, Melainan was used, and Aegyptian. Okay, the dove was black because she was Egyptian. Why would Herodotus conclude that black made reference to the Egyptian identity of the woman? Why? Because the Egyptians loved the color black. That's all. It's not because they were black.
Say what?
You serious?
Okay. Herodotus concluded that because he knew the Egyptians were black. Remember, the men saw them and stated that they were black because of the heat of the harsh sun of their land. The melanes people had a lot of melanin in them that made them black because of the sun, the heat. And still, this is not a clue. And there is no debate here. There is a consensus across all translations. Melainan means black. Now, the next term, melain, was used in Heliodorus' Aethiopica when speaking of the complexion of Meroboss, a young Nubian prince. Here is the quote. "The youth Meroboss, at the mention of a wife, was seen to blush through his dark complexion from mingled pleasure and modesty." Original Greek, Meroboss, Melain. Okay, dark complexion. We see here again another attempt to fool the reader, to the point where even the translator, seeing that they were speaking of an Ethiopian/Nubian, saw fit to inform us that an older translation translated Melain as black. Here is what he said. it would be unfair to deprive the reader of the very quaint rendering of the passage in the version of 1717. Mirobus, young and bashful, and wonderfully tickled at the thoughts of a bride, blushed through his black skin, his face looking like a ball of soot that had taken fire. We see here a clear example of more recent scholars tending to be more dishonest when translating the terms that meant black. Melain, having the roots melan in it, must certainly mean black, as in black skin or complexion. And this term was also used in the physiognomics when they were speaking about eye color. Those whose eyes are excessively black are cowardly, for it was shown above that an excessively black color signifies cowardice. The original Greek agan melain, excessively black color. Agan melain was used here, and they translated it as excessively black. So again, no debate on this term. It means black. Next term. 5. Meleicsimos and Meleicsimos. These are terms that were used to describe the skin of the Kemites by the ancient Greek poet Achilles in his book The Suppliant Maidens. Here are the quotes. The men on board are plainly seen, their black limbs showing from their white attire. Here's the original Greek text. Meleicsimos was used. Their limbs were black. Meleicsimos means black, according to this online ancient Greek lexicon. Meleicsimos, black. That is why serious scholars translated it as black limbs and not dark limbs, as certain dishonest scholars tried to do in other translations of the Suppliant Maidens. Why change the word from black to dark when the author in the original used the term black? Because dark is more of a vague term, but black isn't. To a Northern European, for example, or to any European, when we say dark, they think of anybody darker than they are. But when we say black, they think of Africans, the emblem of black people. And we all know that if someone visited Africa and said that they saw people with black skin, we would all think of Sudanese, Kenyans, Ethiopians, Nigerians, Senegalese, Rwandese, Ugandans, etc. Nobody is going to think Armenian or Turks. And if you do, well, you have some serious eyesight deficiency, and only Imhotep, the great doctor, can help you there. Because
It is a sickness! It is deviant, therefore we do not want it. Do not partake in this ever again.
the poet Aeschylus goes on further to describe the skin of the Kemites on another instance, letting us know by that it was something remarkable and unusual to the pale-skinned Europeans they were. Here is the quote. Abominable is the lustful race of Aegyptus. They have sailed here, attended by a mighty black host, and in their wrath overtaken us. Original Greek text. You can see the corresponding words, Aegyptus, Meleicsimos, and the word for host in ancient Greek. Now, a black host. The Egyptians, the Kemites, have sailed there with a mighty black host. Since Aeschylus already spoke of their black limbs, it is fair to say that he is speaking here again of their skin color and not their attire, because the Egyptians wore white attires. This we know from their paintings and even from this very poem, their black limbs showing from their white attire. Yes, and we can conclude this since we have seen in this video again, for the ancient Greeks, the Kemites were black Africans, just like the Nubians and other Ethiopians. So on many instances, the ancient Egyptians have been associated with the color black. Their skin color has been unanimously described by the ancient Greeks as being black. And the Greeks were not the only ones who described the Kemites thus. The next term is actually from a Roman source. 6. Atrati. This is a word that was used by Ammianus Marcellinus, a Roman historian, in order to describe the population of Kemite in his book The Roman Histories. Here is the quote. The inhabitants of Egypt are generally swarthy and dark complexioned. Original Latin, I think I can read this one. Homines autem Aegypti lerici subfusculi sunt et atrati.
LOL!
I'm messing it up, I know, but you know, it looks a bit like French and Spanish and Portuguese. So tell me how my Latin is in the comment section for those who can speak Latin. I know I messed it up. Anyway, here the translation is being crooked again. We are dealing here with dishonest scholars again. Why? Well, simply because subfusculi means somewhat brown and atrati means black or blackened. A proper translation should therefore be the men of Egypt are as a rule somewhat brown and black. The lexicons and dictionaries are clear on this, but they instead use vague terms like swarthy, which means dark complexion still, but is also synonym to brown and black. So very vague. So even by trying to cover up the truth, the terms used are still revealing, but then they translate atrati as dark complexioned, which leads some people to say that they are not speaking of African dark complexion, but that of Near Easterners. The reality is that atrati simply means black. And further, we are going to see how the same author described the same Near Eastern dark complexion. So with these quotes and originals, I believe we have already debunked quite many arguments about these quotes being misinterpreted. But now there are two other arguments that need to be addressed in order to thoroughly debunk the claim that the ancients did not see the Kemites as black Africans. The first one is the claim that to the ancient Greeks and Romans, any dark-skinned people were lumped in together under the same term. This is completely false. And when you think about it, it is quite nonsensical. These people want us to believe that the ancient Greeks and Romans had a vocabulary so limited that they could not distinguish between varying skin tones. Nah, I cannot believe this because I have seen the evidence. The ancient Greeks and Romans certainly noticed among those darker than they were a difference of skin tone. The examples I gave here debunk this. We have seen, for instance, that the ancient Greeks had many terms to describe the darkness of people's skin: melanes, melanas, melain, Meleicsimos, melancros, etc. All these terms were used on both Africans further south, Cushites and Kemites. Now, from those who attack these claims, I am yet to see an instance where these terms are used to describe a Syrian, for example, or an Anatolian. And in Latin, I caught modern scholars on a lie and attempt of manipulation. This concerns the term atrati being translated as dark complexioned. Here is what I found. Ammianus Marcellinus used the term atrati in the original, which means black or blackened, yet the translation says dark complexion. Why is this a problem? Well, simply because when the same author described the dusky complexion of a certain someone with a different Latin word, the translation still used the term dark complexion. Here is the evidence, Your Honor. Procopius departed this life at the age of 40 years and 10 months. Personally, he was a tall man and not bad looking. He was somewhat dark complexioned. Here you have the original Latin. Latin is a bit easier to read because it looks just like French, Spanish, or Portuguese. So we look at the original Latin. Excessit autem vita Procopius. So now we're sure that this is the original. Procopius anno quadragesimo. So the term used to describe his skin color is subaquilus. See the crookery? The original said subaquilus. Well, the translation said dark complexion. But in the original, we don't see atrati. Well, does subaquilus also mean black? Well, not quite. Subaquilus means dusky complexion. Now see the crookery? The original said subaquilus, which means dusky complexion according to the lexicon. Clearly, the Romans had more than one word to describe varying skin tones. A person of a dusky complexion is darker than, say, a Northern European. So if that was the case, that they saw everyone darker than them as black, why did they not use atrati here instead of a different word? Because they had a rich vocabulary. So how can atrati and subaquilus both mean dark complexion, an attempt to mislead the reader? so that when they see this Procopius, a Roman, being described as dark complexion, the reader would think Italian complexion or Turkish complexion or Near Eastern complexion. And when the same dark complexion is applied on the ancient Egyptian people, the reader has no choice but to think of the Roman dark complexion instead of the African one. While in the original, it is very clear. The author made sure to tell us that Procopius, the Roman, had a dusky complexion, while the men of Egypt were generally black, atrati, and somewhat brown, subfusculi, and Procopius was dusky complexioned, subaquilus. 3 different terms to describe varying skin tones. Latin and ancient Greek, just like English today, had various words to describe skin complexions. In English, for instance, you have ebony, black, brown, swarthy, fair, pale, dusky, olive, white, etc. All these words just to describe the varying skin tones that you find in the peoples of this world. Therefore, we can't believe that Europeans only noticed variations between skin tones of people darker than they are only recently. That does not make sense. You are just insulting the intelligence and perceptive abilities of your very own ancestors in doing this. And to what end? To keep up a bunch of lies alive? You are wise enough to know that they will eventually fall, so just give up and stop insulting your very own ancestors' intelligence. The second argument they often make is that the ancient Greeks had only one term to describe Africans, and that is the term Aethiops. This is very dishonest and so low of the modern scholars to have spread this lie. I see many people coming to tell me that Greeks called black people Aethiops only. This lie is so prevalent out there that even Google Translate says that Aethiops means Negro. The following evidence I am about to present will completely destroy this view, so take some notes so that you can also destroy this lie in the various comment sections out there. One thing to note though is that those who bring up this argument also just so happen to be racist. Yes, racist. I can prove it. There was a viewer called Moataz. He was among those who kept bringing this argument up over and over in my comment section. Well, look at what Moataz did after he couldn't make up any more arguments.
The previous video was full of Afrocentrist BS, misquotes, misinterpretations, and outright lies.
How so? He does not say. Or when he does, it is not addressing the point I made in the video. Or he did not even check the sources I provided in the description. So how can this be a fair debate? You don't even check my sources. So seeing that the brilliant people in the comment section were just going after him and his flawed arguments, he resorted to the following.
Sex alatos angelos, no ape, you and your likes, who have been squealing for dignity and self-worth, can't do it by racial cultural appropriation.
Interesting.
Gary Berry, hey moron, English is my third language. You lowlife are illiterate in your own language. Get lost, ape, with you ad hominem, white guy wannabe. Gary Berry, monkey, monkey, monkey.
Racial slurs and insults. That's what Moataz resorted to. Racial slurs and insults. But such morons are easy to dismiss, and they are a great example of the people that often vehemently disagree to this. Egyptians being black are often just racist. They can't accept that black people that they view as lower than everyone in their hierarchy of races could have been able to be the ones at the origin of such a great civilization. And such people often have flawed arguments, so it is easy to dismantle them and easy to debunk them. Now let me destroy the claim that Aethiops means Negro and that it is how the ancient Greeks referred to the Africans. The person who spread this lie clearly did not read enough ancient Greek authors. Aethiops refers to the nationality of a person and not the skin color. Therefore, Aethiops should be translated as a person from the land of Ethiopia, hence an Ethiopian, and not black person or Negro as Google and Moataz would have you believe. Now, how do I know this? Well, because various authors used this term that way. The first is Lucian of Samosata, who said in The Shape of the Wishes, Suppose Leucippe, that an Ethiopian who had never been abroad in his life nor seen other men like us were to state categorically in an Ethiopian assembly that there did not exist on earth any white or yellow men, nothing but blacks, would his statement be accepted? Original Greek, Aethiops and melanas were used here. Notice that here even the scholars translated it as Ethiopian because they know Lucian is speaking of the nationality of the person. But then, what proves that Aethiops does not mean black is that Lucian further uses the term melanas when speaking of the skin color of the men of Ethiopia. If Aethiops meant black skin already, it would be redundant to use the term melanas. And we also saw many other authors' quotes describing the Ethiopians. None of them used the term Aethiops to describe their skin color. Instead, all of them used words that have the root melan or melas in them in order to describe the skin color of the Ethiopians. Diodorus Siculis is a great example here. Quote, "But there are also a great many other tribes of the Ethiopians. The majority of them, and especially those who dwell along the river, are black in color and have flat noses and woolly hair." So we can see again in the original Greek, the corresponding words are Ethiopian and melanes. Diodorus Siculis used the term melanes to describe the skin of the Ethiopians. Why did he not use Aethiops? Because Aethiops means person from Ethiopia, therefore nationality, not skin color. And from this quote, we also learn that there were black people on the Arabian Peninsula as well as the southern part of Libya. This is obvious even today. Yemen and Libya still have black people in their countries. Now here is a quote from a serious translation that further proves that Aethiops means Ethiopian and not blacks or Negroes. This is in Achilles Tatius' book Clitophon and Leucippe. I quote, "They, the Egyptian brigands, were all tall and stout. Their complexion was black, not the jet black of the Indians, but that of a mongrel Ethiopian." In the original Greek, the corresponding words are melanes, Indian, and Aethiops. Aethiops was again translated as Ethiopian and not Negro or black as Google and the likes of Moataz would have you believe. And the thing is that when they make this argument, they, unlike us, never provide any sources for what they claim, or even quotes where the Greeks unanimously used the term Aethiops to describe the skin color of Africans. But we have provided several quotes that show that when the ancient Greeks spoke of the skin, they used terms that have the root melan in them. If Aethiops was the sole word used for black skin, why would Herodotus not use Aethiops when he spoke of the Twa people? Because Aethiops is not a term for skin complexion. It is a term that refers to the nationality of a person. To the proponents of Aethiops meant Negro, please drop your sources and arguments in the comment section below. Also, when you do this, please feel free to attack the brilliant scholars who translated those ancient Greek works as well. Most of those are Europeans, if not all of them are Europeans, so you can't say that there is a conflict of interest there. Alright, there you have it. A way to debunk people who claim that we are misinterpreting the ancient Greeks who definitely described the ancient Egyptians as black-skinned people. Exactly the way one would describe any other African people south of the Sahara today. With this evidence, we can safely say that the ancient Egyptians were in majority black Africans. And with this, I rest my case, Your Honor. This is why reconstructions like the ones done by Mr.Imhotep or the King's Monologue are simply accurate. The King's Monologue, for instance, has the most reliable reconstructions of the Kemites out there. He joins the club of great reconstructions such as that of Richard Neves, one of the rare scholars who have done an honest reconstruction of an ancient individual. Richard Neves once did a reconstruction of the mummy of Nessie Amun, And guess what skin color he gave him? Black, as you can see on the screen, matching all the ancient descriptions we have just seen. The King's Monologue is the same and perhaps better. His method is infallible and most commendable because he relies on the bust and statues for the likeness, because the sculptors of the ancient Egyptians were accurate in their work. He relies on the mummies too to make the traits line up perfectly. This is great. That way they cannot attack him on a crucial element of reconstructions. He also relies on the paintings for the skin tone, as well as the peoples around the area. And these descriptions of the ancient Egyptians by the ancient Greeks come to support his choice in the skin coloration of his reconstructions. They cannot attack his reconstructions. At least not people who have an objective mind. His King Tut and Queen Tia reconstructions are my favorite. They look like someone traveled through time and took a picture of the pharaoh and his grandma. That's why the King Tut one got millions of views on TikTok. The reconstruction looks real. It looks like the bust, and it was so pleasant to see a true reconstruction. His channel is gaining more and more subscribers and viewers every day, and I love that. This means the truth is being spread and accepted. People were fed up with the lies they were told all their life. If you are not subscribed to the King's Monologue channel, you better head over there and subscribe right now. What are you doing? Link in the description, of course. Alright, this script was long to write and demanded hours of research. I have presented text translations with their originals. I have checked lexicons and dictionaries to make sure I understood the meaning of what was said. And of course, I have linked all my sources in the description below in order for you to check all my research. And again, all these sources are free to check online. My job was just to find them and compile them for you. So please support the channel with likes, comments, and share the video around. We are almost at 10,000 subscribers, so please share the channel link, share the videos link, and let people join the Quelimica family. Yeah, this video took long to record as well. It took long to edit, so please help the channel. Encourage me. More content is coming. See you in the next one. Peace.